The first half of this video is me complaining about the Hannah Swensen series. If you want, you can skip ahead to 426, which is when I start talking about how I would end the series. Like many people, I think the Hannah Swensen series is past its prime. It started well, but it's gone on for too long. The books keep getting worse and worse. The series needs to end. People have been saying this for 20 years following book 6. My big problem is that it's not a mystery series anymore. It doesn't care about mystery. All it cares about is food and recipes. It's common for the characters to spend 10 pages talking about food, followed by 10 pages of recipes. It's also common for conversations to be stretched out for 2 or 3 chapters. Because Hannah can't just talk to someone, she has to make them food first, then talk about the food for most of the conversation, then talk about the food when summarizing the conversation for someone else. No joke, book 29 has 5 chapters dedicated to making one stew. The food talk completely dominates all the mystery and murder investigation. It often feels like the author's making a concentrated effort to ignore the mystery, to have the murder happen as close as possible to the end of the book. The worst offender was book 23. The mystery starts on page 234. I singled out book 6 as the point where people started seriously complaining about the series. That book definitely ignores the mystery. The mystery doesn't start until halfway through. 2 suspects are exonerated on a single page, because we don't want to spend a lot of time on that. And it goes on for quite a while after the mystery wraps up. The worst part is that the book has 172 pages of recipes. No story, just recipes. It's a half-length book, and it still can't be bothered to focus on mystery. The rest of the series follows the trend of having the mystery take up less than half the book. In general, recipes and talking about recipes makes up over half of the page count. This coincides with the mystery investigations becoming pretty weak. Hannah often doesn't get around to meeting all of the murder suspects. The other major problem with the series is the drawn-out love triangle with Mike and Norman. I lost all interest in the storyline after the book where both men proposed to Hannah and she refused to make a decision. The love stuff has gone on for too long. Hannah needs to make a choice instead of stringing the men along for another decade. It is sad to see book 6 readers complain, this love triangle is too drawn out, because, well, that was 20 years ago, and it is still going with no end in sight. The worst part of Hannah's love life was the 4-book interlude with Ross. Hannah's friend Ross returns to town. Hannah instantly falls in love with Ross and agrees to marry him. I can't believe she dumped Mike and Norman in favor of a relative stranger. Ross abandons Hannah after a week. It's revealed he was married to someone else the entire time. Ross comes back to town in a fit of violent desperation. He demands that Hannah give him $10,000 and a storage locker key shortly before he's killed in an unrelated accident. Yeah, his death has nothing to do with his marriage to Hannah. Go figure. I hated the whole storyline with Ross. He made for a terrible husband, even before the twist that he was the villain all along. Many elements of Ross's story remain unresolved. We never learn who his wife is, why he tricked Hannah into marrying him, or why he wanted so much money. Those are the major complaints against the Hannah Swensen series. People also complain about the characters. Their personalities have eroded over the years. Lisa and Michelle are basically interchangeable at this point. Given all of those complaints, how would I end the Hannah Swensen series? Well, I would fix all the big problems. I'd put the focus back on mysteries. Like the first few books, I would have 2 murders per book and fewer than 10 recipes. I would resolve the love triangle with Mike and Norman and wrap up all the loose ends with Ross. Ideally, I would end the series with a trilogy, which would allow for enough space to give a solid resolution to the dozens of characters. I would also go for a dramatic ending, where one of Hannah's close friends is murdered. I thought of two endings, one for Mike and one for Norman. In the Norman ending, Mike and Norman come to blows over which one of them will marry Hannah. Mike is murdered in the cookie jar that night. The police are furious in their determination to catch the cop killer. Norman's the prime suspect as he has a strong motive and no alibi. He refuses to say where he was that night. Hannah's investigation reveals that Norman met an unknown woman at Lake Eden Inn. They spent an hour at the bar together, even though Norman doesn't drink alcohol. He didn't seem like himself when he and the woman left together. Hannah tries to find the woman in vain. The cookie jar is burned to the ground with Lisa trapped inside. It looks like the killer set the fire in order to destroy some evidence. As a result, Norman's let out of police custody. Norman confesses the woman he met with is Ross's wife. He wraps up the loose plot threads from the Ross storyline. Norman and Hannah share passionate kisses together in a surprisingly spicy scene for the series. Hannah and Norman's love only grows as they team up to solve the mystery. They are surprised when the culprit ends up being Claire, who owns the store next door. She was Ross's secret wife all along. She and Ross were planning to kill Hannah for the insurance money. That way she could buy the cookie jar and expand her store. After Claire's arrested, Norman proposes to Hannah. This time she accepts. They get married and have 3 kids named Dolores, Carrie, and Mike. Nobody mentions how creepy it is that Hannah named her son after her ex-boyfriend. For Mike's storyline, I would start with Hannah's sister Michelle graduating from college. She announces she's going to marry her longtime boyfriend Lonnie. This ramps up the pressure on Hannah to finally pick a husband. Andrea doesn't show up to the graduation party. Hannah looks for Andrea, only to discover Andrea has been killed. Everyone is shocked, and Mother cries, "No, not my favorite daughter!" Hannah can't help but feel offended that her mother likes her the least of all her children. Hannah purposely upsets her mother by throwing herself at Mike. Mike has no objections, while Norman becomes so petty and jealous that Hannah starts to dislike him. She realizes she prefers the exciting Mike to the boring, safe Norman. The major suspect in the mystery is Ross's wife, who came to town a week ago demanding to have Ross's money and storage locker key. She swore to make Hannah suffer when Hannah said no. Ross's wife repeats her demands when she crashes Andrea's funeral. Mike and Hannah search Ross's belongings. They find a blackmail tape for various movie stars. It seems Ross got in major trouble after trying to blackmail the wrong person. The last person on the tape is Hannah's rarely seen actress best friend. She becomes the next major suspect. The culprit attempts to kill Hannah, but Mike rescues her in time. The culprit puts poison in one of Hannah's sugar containers. Many customers get sick. A few of them die, including Norman. The mystery solution brings things around to the first book of the series. The culprit in that book was married, so I'd say the culprit can be the first culprit's spouse, or it's the same culprit who somehow got out of jail. In both cases, the culprit wants revenge against Hannah and Andrea. Mike and Hannah stop the culprit, and they agree to get married. Hannah and her mother have a serious conversation where Mother apologizes for all the bad things she's done to Hannah. The conversation ends on a joke. Hannah tells her mother she's getting married because she's pregnant. Mother faints from shock. Just like with Norman's story, I would end things with a scene of Hannah and Mike 30 years later, which shows what happened to all the various characters. Those are my ideas for ending the Hannah Swensen series. I obviously do not write these books, so I doubt my suggestions will come to pass. I do think there's a chance the series will end with Hannah marrying either Mike or Norman. That seems like a good place to end the series.